Good evening and welcome to the first live of 2026. Another year bites the dust.
Does indeed.
God, they just go quicker and quicker. Don't get old, everyone. So welcome to our first. I'm joined by Matt Williams, who's joined us in the last couple of months as our putting fitter and coach. So very kind of him to step into the breach. Stuart, unfortunately, isn't with us this evening, and actually, sadly, due to timing constraints on his diary and when we've got to do the lives, sadly won't be joining us on the lives in the future anymore, which is a great pity. We might be able to get him back every now and then as a special guest, but unfortunately his diary constraints and what he needs to do with his timings and when we have to do this sadly don't match up. So for those of you who are hoping to see him this evening, apologies, but we have a very good substitute for you. So a little bit of background with Matt. You're Bournemouth way originally?
Yeah. So
well,
not originally, no, I grew up in
further west
Cornwall.
than that.
I was a junior at a few clubs down in Cornwall and then moved to the Bournemouth area.
Yeah.
Went there on their university programme and then quickly turned pro pretty much straight away rather than finishing the programme. So 12 years as a pro now. So yeah, it's gone from more of a playing background into coaching and fitting, specialising more in putting and short game, mostly because that was a weakness of mine when I was playing. So saw a lot of what we would regard as the game's best coaches in those aspects, and very fortunate to have been able to kind of pick their brains, pick some of the other brains of top players in the game, and enhance my knowledge as a result.
It's interesting because for me, short game was never my strength. I'd have run completely other direction as you've gone straight into it.
I think,
so what was it about short game that kind of made you, obviously, working on it yourself, but is there anything particular about the short game itself that you particularly have a connection to? For
me, it was, I think on social media, every now and then your friends will send you a message saying, tag someone who can't beat this. And unfortunately, other pros I was competing against started doing that with myself. So it became a bit of a common trend that my short game was just a weakness, whether that be bunkers. The harder the shot, actually, probably the better I performed.
Got it.
Those tight lies over a bunker.
You used to see that with Westwood.
Yeah.
Play some amazing shots beautifully well, but a fairly simple chip, seemingly not so good at.
Yeah, and that was very much my aspect. I was always looking from a fitting perspective. A new wedge came out, SM5, SM6 back at the time, and it was like, okay, weight placement ahead. Is this going to cure it? And the reps were like, no, that's not going to sort you out. You need to. So I spent a lot of time with some of the best coaches, certainly UK-wise, like James Ridyard, Alex Buckner. And then a lot of good putting coaches as well. Actually saw a coach out in Germany, a guy called Sinjin McNabb.
Okay,
He was Hank Haney's right-hand man for 3 years with Tiger. And he was very good from a putting standpoint. Almost conflicting with what I knew, having done my PJ training. It was very conflicting to what I knew is right. But when he broke it down, it made a lot of sense. So, lots of sort of, not secrets of the tour, because I don't think there's any secrets these days. I think everything's kind of out there. But yeah, sort of lots of things that have been tried and tested that maybe aren't in notebooks and magazines.
And Matt does trips as well. You do a few overseas trips a year.
Yeah, so last 9 years I've been doing that. November was my 25th trip that I've done. We've got another one at the end of January, which is fully booked. Another one in March that's fully booked. We've got one in November that's fully booked, 24 of us. So because a lot of my regulars have missed out on that trip, I've actually opened another trip for November. So wife's not overly happy, 2 weeks away, but but
you'll be nice and warm, so it'll be fine.
Be nice and warm, all inclusive, and some great golf courses as well, most importantly. So it gives me something to work towards for my own golf as well.
So from a coaching point of view, kind of coaching questions, particularly short game putting questions, fire them in, and we'll get Matt to answer them. I'm going to grab the iPad now, and we will. Well, thank you. First and foremost, thank you everyone for joining us in this fresh new year, and let's start from top down, get going. So. Chris and Kate Gamble just watched the video on the M13, M15. Those are the new Mizuno irons that are launched. The embargo lifted 3 hours ago. Look awesome, very good looking heads. Do you think there's enough tech in the M13 not to combo to the 15s in the lower irons? And when are they available in the custom fitting base? So we'd expect them to have them in a couple of weeks' time or so. We don't have an exact date yet, but obviously with the embargo now lifting, Mizuno will be getting all the demo components out pretty soon. I would say from a couple of weeks' time we should have them, but at the moment it's a bit of a should. We don't have an exact date, but certainly end of month comfortably, probably kind of mid to second half. Is there enough tech in the long irons? So they're an extension, they're effectively a progression on the 243, which had a kind of single piece 8-9 and pitch, and then from 7-iron up a little bit more ball speed progression as you go up the set. So In principle, I would say that Mizuno have developed a head that doesn't necessarily need comboing unless you just wanted a little bit more forgiveness in the top end. You're going to get ball speed progression from the M13s like the 243s, but a slightly bigger frame, a little bit more depth of weighting in the M15, taking over from the 245s. It would only be for that reason, but from a ball speed point of view, we've actually seen really strong numbers off the 243 long irons, and I would expect the same from the 13s. So the answer is not necessarily. Ivan 3221, hello gentlemen, swing request for Matt, but you can have, depending on which Matt you're expecting, if it was the taller Matt, then he's actually in the stock room at the moment. But I've primed Matt for this so he can have a hit with this. Can he test he's not short of speed either, by the way, not as quick as that
Not
one,
as quick,
but it's quicker than me, that's for sure. Can he test the Cobra DS Max K versus the GT3 Titleist, looking for a forgiving lower spinning model? Can you run the test with a dim on a whiteboard? Thanks and Happy New Year. Right, Let me stick these together for you. Any preference on which one first?
I don't mind. Let's go Cobra. I haven't actually swung a Cobra driver for a few years.
I think Cobra underrated as a brand. I think they've innovated quite a lot over the years and not necessarily been given the credit for it. I think they've doing multicolour drive heads probably hasn't helped. But I think actually some of the products they've had, I need to get heavier weight for the head. Some of the products they've actually had have been really, really strong.
Yeah, it's been what was it? The F9, I think, was the last one that I potentially hit. I think I had an F8 and then progressed into F9. Mm-hmm. I think that was possibly the last time I've hit one of their drivers. I've always kind of played more Mizuno TaylorMade.
Okay, yeah.
Very much Titleist when I was younger, but certainly since I turned pro, more Mizuno TaylorMade.
Yeah, and so because there's bound to be some questions about new equipment cropping up sometime soon, embargo dates lift. So 2 days time on the Mizuno Woods, and then we're looking at kind of 12th and 13th for a lot of the new products. So I think Cobra the 13th, I want to say Ping of the 13th. So yeah, there are quite a few products that we can't talk about yet that we have seen.
Yeah.
But that's as soon as we can, we'll get the questions answered on here. So I would say this is one of the underrated heads this year. I think as from a stability point of view, he says just
long way out the toe. That's me, that one.
Actually been a really strong performing head. I mean, this one's, depending on what swing weight you play, this one's about D1.5, D2. So actually considering launch window, so Matt hits up on it quite a bit, 5.5 up, so delivers a decent bit of loft. This one in the 9 degree. Actually spin relative to launch angle isn't too bad. Now I doubt you play much loft. I don't actually know what clubs Matt plays.
Yeah, so I've currently got the, what have we got? QI10 LS head, yeah. 8 degree.
8 degree, I was going to say.
Cranked at 6.
Yeah.
So with 70 grams.
So actually, that spin number for someone who plays that spec,
yeah,
that's because it's a 9-minute standard setup.
Yeah.
So switch.
I mean, for me, that's like I said, that's 3 degrees more loft than what I play. I typically see somewhere between 2 and maybe 2.4 spin. Mm-hmm. So that's maybe a touch more, but again, speed is probably a touch lower than what it would normally be. I probably need a good 10 minutes of a warm up before I start going these days. But
actually,
I mean, feel off the face is quite nice. The acoustics are quite nice. Shape-wise, probably I would say slightly more triangular than maybe what the GT3 would be. It's not
swing weight, but
it's not an off-putting look at all. This is obviously a lot more traditional Titleist shaping, bit more of a gloss effect on the head.
And I expect this to come out just a little bit flatter based on just head design and what we've seen from this head over the year. It's a very different sound.
Very different acoustics. Obviously, we're in quite a good environment to get echoes and sounds and so on. So it does sound, to me, probably a bit more
So hit up
punchy.
on that a bit less, but spins 600 lower.
Yeah, with more speed.
Max K is about maximum forgiveness, not necessarily about lowest spin. So actually for it to hold it where it did for a head that's really geared around, maximum weight at the back, which is going to dynamically add a little bit of lofted impact, actually kind of held onto that pretty well. I'd say certainly wouldn't be for someone with your launch conditions the first head I'd go to, whereas the GT is much more along the lines of ball flight.
Felt a little bit toey.
Yeah.
Not much, but enough.
So it was whether the ball still attacked, whether that one kind of knuckled the spin off. So I mean, that one's a bit of an exaggeration, but I'd say the first couple, seeing 1.5 degree odd launch angle difference, you're going to see a bit of an actual launch angle difference, but that's 600 revs of spin, not a massive shock. Especially at that speed being kind of high teens, high one teens, that might amplify it a little bit more than for most, but you should see kind of 300 to 500 revs of spin, I would have thought, difference, and a little bit more launch out of the max K just because of that deeper weighting. I figured I'd mix up the swing request. So thank you for not, I've now thankful I don't really want to compete with that. So. Daniel Winterbottom. Hi gents, what irons would you say a good blend between forgiveness and workability? Currently play P770 as the loft helps me, but looking to try others. So I think there's a bit of a misconception about workability. Any club head you can fade or draw because that's face angle. So yes, in theory, a smaller, more compact head, you might get a little bit more side spin to it, but I think the misconception is forgiving heads are hard to shape. Not the case. I think you ask most 18, 20 handicappers out there and they can hook or slice them with the best. So I think from a flight workability, it's more kind of the high-low workability in principle, where you might struggle with a more forgiving, bigger framed short iron that's going to pop it up a little bit more. I think the 770s are a really nice head. I would say, like similar, T150. Titleist is going to sit in a very, very similar category, similar head shape, neater lines, gives some performance, bit of pop off the face, but definitely sits in that more kind of the workable, more kind of players style head in particular. And so take the new Mizuno heads M13, that 100% sits in that category. You're not gaining any forgiveness, I don't think, on those heads, but a little bit of a softer sound and feel, potentially a little bit more. You might be able to play with the ball flight just a little bit more. I'm just going to make sure the screen doesn't go off. So I think those couple retain a lot of the characteristics that you're seeing out of the 770s. T150s maybe a little lower launching, but keep the workability. Joseph Wortley, evening gents from the US, good afternoon in your case. Thoughts on VA Composites driver shafts, specifically the Nemesis and Sinister. Why aren't they more popular on tour? Well, the Nemesis and Sinister are totally different beasts from a swinging point of view. Nemesis is really pretty counterbalanced and a bit of a softer tip. Sinister is much more tip balanced. There are two Sinisters. There's the original Sinister, which is the one I play, which is lower launch, lower spin, tip balanced, tip stable, but smoother feel. And then they've got the CB, which sits similar kind of low spin profile, but a higher balance shaft. And then Nemesis is more counterbalanced again than that. So Nemesis is definitely more responsive, and so definitely designed for a bit more of a kick and a little bit more launch. And then the Sinisters are generally designed to bring the flight down a little bit more. But the original Sinister definitely is a tip heavy shaft, because I know I need that in the driver. As to why you don't see them on tour, they're a little bit more niche. Vic was actually meant to be over, Victor Afable, who's the owner, was meant to be over and with us today, but unfortunately couldn't travel. We're going to see him in Orlando. But they don't prioritize the tour. So companies like Fujikura and Mitsubishi will put a massive budget towards putting the shafts in tour players' hands, having support, having a rep on tour. Companies like Acra, Oban, VA Composites, that's not what they're after. They're actually after getting them in studios like ours to get them fitted into the consumer's hands. They do get a bit of tour play, but that's not where they want to put their budget ultimately. And there is an element of it costs to get them out on tour and to support tour. Kev T 6784, how are you, Kev? Happy New Year. Simon, is it true that if you have stiff flex irons, you should use a stiff flex in driver and fairway woods? Many thanks. The answer is not necessarily. I think
It's down to weight, I would say.
that's, yeah, I think it's probably the flex side is probably one of the most asked questions we get, but one of the most, I think, misrepresented bits of shafts, because depends what the brand and the model is designed for as to where they then put the flexes, and therefore what the letter on the shaft or the number on the shaft actually means from a, so I say number because some use the universal 345 flex code. You get some brands like Acra in the past have had them what they call die match. So every shaft in that line, if it's a 3 or 4 flex, they play the same across the whole range. But other brands, it's a massive progression in flex, in actual playing flex, as the weight goes up or as the models change. So I absolutely wouldn't get hung up on it. But ultimately, if it works, that's the most important thing. But between a reg and a stiff, you're looking 3% for the bend of the shaft. So
it's how it feels, I think. It's, like you said, performance. I think the questions are an interesting one. I know when I was a head pro and I ran a shop for kind of 2-3 years when doing fittings, that was often a question is, do I need to match throughout? And then you get the question as well, I know it's going slightly off topic, but should I have the same shaft in my 3-wood as my driver? Or 5-wood or whatever it might be. End of the day, it's what matches to how you deliver the club, and you will swing each club differently. So from your irons into your woods will be very different. Obviously, angle of attack and how you deliver it dynamically will be very different. And then again, even if lots of 7-woods around these days, 7-woods, 5-woods, how you use those will be different to, say, a driver. So yeah, it's very individual.
Yeah, and it is one of those where the flex, as you said, the feel side of it is really that. In some respects, is where more of the effect is. If you're someone who likes to feel a shaft kick and you play something too stiff or that has a stout feel, it might make you kind of get your shoulder into it to try and force some feedback out the shaft. I know for me, I'm used to playing, because my miss was always a hook, I'm used to playing a stiffer profile because historically that's what we believed would help. And so if I play something softer as I start down, I feel it wobble and I back out of it. But that's me reacting to the feel of the shaft. So it does play a part in it, but in terms of direct results on ball flight, absolutely minimal.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Michael Henderson retracted his question, so we might find one. There's one later on, so we'll get to that very shortly. Macro9, Happy New Year, folks. Looking forward to the show. Thank you very much. Happy New Year to you too. Andrew Holland, Happy New Year to all at PG. Got the great news from Jenny today. My SeeMore putter will be with me this week, expertly fitted by Matt. Why aren't there more SeeMore on tour? They were years ahead of Lab. Question mark.
Well, obviously, Lab, first of all, is a very different concept. I think marketing budgets are different. Both are standalone putter brands. So my argument has always been for SeeMore is they are a standalone brand. They're not pulling funds from driver sales, iron sales, ball sales to fund putter marketing. I mean, they've been on tour. Zach Johnson won his majors using
what
a
year
SeeMore.
did he win the Masters?
Cool. Oh, you've chucked one in there. The Open was 2010, wasn't it?
Yeah, St Andrews. Yeah. There's got to be not long after 2000.
Around that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they've been around for years. The technology, as Andrew knows, the rifle scope technology, for anyone who has an alignment bias or unbiased, it's one of those that really dials it in. It gives you instant feedback. Which I quite like. When I'm doing putter fittings, I always ask myself the question of what are we fitting for? Are we fitting for alignment? Are we fitting for ball roll? Are we fitting for strike? What are we doing? And quite often that directs me towards particular brands.
Right.
Just knowing that, okay, they tend to do well there. If they don't for whatever reason, then we can start to wonder. But SeeMore is one of those brands that if it's an alignment issue, let's put that in. Let's see the feedback that you get. I had a chap earlier today, and it was very much the case of, okay, this is the first one we're trying. Data on Quintec, he went from aiming, I think it was sort of 2 to 2.5 degrees open and shutting it.
Right.
Actually shutting it left of square as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Put him there, and he was within half degree, which for me, not only was he aiming it half degree, he was returning it within half degree the other side. So his amount of rotation had closed because it's center shaft. So the rotation point is different rather than at the heel. But he was able to aim it better with that technology. So going back to the original question of why is it not on tour, I just think it's like you said earlier about the shafts, budget.
Yeah.
You know, you're paying a rep to be there. You're
Yeah.
paying their transport. You're taking bags of putters out there.
When I say putters, we want the pros are, if there's a bag of putters, the pros will come and take one.
Yeah, and the thing with SeeMore is where they are centre shaft, there's no loft and lie adjustments. You couldn't just get a loft and lie machine out on the putting green and I don't want to name a certain brand and promote one over another, but you know, a conventional brand, you can tweak it to the individual.
Yeah.
So with SeeMore, you can't. They are more of a bespoke product. Similar to Lab, they are a bespoke product.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is a lot of tour players put a Lab in the bag. It's out within 3 to 4 months. They're then back into something more conventional.
Right.
No idea why. I've got a personal thought of why, but I don't know why that's the case. But yeah, SeeMore's, they just don't market as much. They're very big in America.
Am I right in saying they used to, quite a few pros used to use them as a training aid?
From an alignment.
And then wouldn't play them in tournament play, but would use them from a training aid.
They're still just as good. You know, milled head, soft feel, maybe not quite as pretty. If I'm going to be critical of them, they're often the brand that they don't have the glamorous aspect of maybe what a Scotty Cameron might, or it doesn't have that appeal.
Yeah.
But that's potentially why they weren't put in the bag. I don't know. Or it might just be contracts.
Yeah.
You know, players in contracts, and they use it as, like you said, a training aid to get their alignment cues, and they see the leading edge of the putter. So when they go back to their gamer, then it helps. So.
Good question. So, yeah, great hand this one. Yip Chip 5341. Happy New Year all. Happy New Year to you. That's a great handle. That's made me smile this evening. Craig Sim, video idea, the history of the evolution of the Ping I series from the IE1, 200, 210, 230 and 240, and how each iteration performance has changed, plus why some pros still use the older versions. Very interesting. And actually the bit about why some pros still use the older versions is actually really quite interesting, because as a head, they've definitely developed model to model. You know, Ping are a company that you can see the progression of the product. We've seen in the Bay with, you know, players with a stronger delivery maybe, or kind of strike the ball slightly higher up the face. Actually, tech doesn't necessarily help. So if you're putting tungsten in the sole, you're moving the center of mass down. If you're someone who gets it up the grooves a little bit more, then actually you end up hitting a dead spot. So for some of the pros, the launch and the spin window out of the older models, I don't know, there was a video idea on the question, but actually the flight window, the launch and spin characteristics of some of those older heads with less tech is actually better. And so hence they're stuck with them. You know, it's very much a case of, in something like an iron, if they're not looking to squeeze every last yard out of it, but someone like Fitzpatrick for years played it was the 200. You know, won a major with them. You know, there's not a lot to change for. Now, I'm looking at this. Tractor Boy Dave, sorry I missed your question. Happy New Year to gents, Happy New Year to you. Looking for a forward lofted club, currently have a 3 and 5 wood. Which, if any, would be the best to reloft to 16 degrees? Well, more brands have forwards now than they used to. They just don't like to call them a forward. So you've got TaylorMade have a 3HL. Which other brands are 3HL? Callaway's 3HL. Ping have a forward. Titleist do a 16.5 degree. You know, Cobra do they call it a 3HL.
Is it 3 plus?
I think they call it a 3HF.
Yeah.
So there are more out there than might seem. In terms of if you were having to go a 3 or a 5, if you're looking to change one of your 3 or 5 wood, then if you were to turn the 3 wood down, it's going to open the face and actually potentially retain a little bit of spin because you're moving the strike principle lower on the face. If you're adding loft, if you're turning the 5 wood down, if you're adding loft to the 3 wood, so you can tell the brain hasn't kicked in after the Christmas break. I'm still opening presents. If you're adding loft to the 3 wood, you're going to turn the toe and it's going to close the face a little bit, but in principle keeps the spin a little bit lower. So depending on if there's a shot-shaped bash you're trying to help, then you can use the heads turning it down to open it and turning it up to close it to help with that. So if that was the question rather than is there a forward club, another one out there, but hopefully that'll answer the question. Macro 9, the one time I have a question for Stuart and he's gone, any advice on what to practice when nursing a bad lower back?
Probably not putting.
Well, that's true, actually, yeah.
You're going to be in a posture for some time, potentially, if you're practicing it for long. Short game? Wedge play, you know, your greenside chipping, your posture's not going to be too hunched, and it's minimal power, I would say. I think it's just a little bit of rotation here. I'm talking 15, 20-foot chip shots. It's not, you know, depending on what space you have at home, you could do what I'd call like a ladder drill, and you could do it as though the ladder's laying on the floor and try and land in between the steps. Or one that I did during lockdown that got a bit of traction online was I actually had the ladder up, A-frame ladder. I used to put a can, every time I had a can of Coke or something, I'd put it on the step. And try and chip. No, it was cans of Coke, not cans of beer. But it was one of those, you're trying to chip the can off the step and then move to the next one. So you're working not just on your distance control, but also trajectory.
Got it. Nice, I like that.
But it doesn't need masses of power or movement. It's a straightforward sort of action. So
interesting.
From my perspective,
and keeps it a bit competitive as well.
Yeah, it gives you, you know, you can almost count it and measure it, which I think is really important. It's something I wish I knew many years ago, is measuring your progress and practice. So how many times does it take you to actually complete that? Might take you 10 shots, it might take you 30 shots, but then you've got like your personal best score. You've got something to try and compete against next time you do it. So.
Just if you're going to take your ladder to the practice ground, make it a light one.
Yes.
The only thing I would say is I came in on Sunday morning to do a little bit of practice, and I haven't had a bad back. It's just been stiff, and it's been by you. Yorkshire blade. Righty-hoo. So the only add-on I was going to make to that was I found coming in on Sunday was that actually it was easier to move. It was, I was able to get more rotation with a mid-iron versus a wedge.
Okay.
Because I was stood up a little bit taller. And thankfully it's a little bit of stiffness rather than being stood up a lot of the time. Glutes get tight and it goes into my lower back. I'm not injured, it's just getting older and stiffer, and the temperature didn't help. But actually, I think just not trying to put too much power in. You know, keep it nice and smooth. As you say, depending on how bad your back is, you definitely don't want to be kind of pounding a load of balls.
Focus more on movement pattern than anything else.
Yorkshire Blades, good evening to you. Hi Simon, can you give us the rundown on what's new and the Mizuno woods? So the Mizuno woods, I'm not allowed to tell you about until Wednesday. So what I can tell you about, I already mentioned the M13 and M15 that take over from the 243, 245 Mizuno Pro series of irons. It's essentially a slight update on them. They're using materials that help them feel a little bit softer, for sure. And they are a really good looking head. That certainly like the M15s, a bit like the 245s, they look very blade-like. They almost look like they should be the other way around. I think if the 13s look like the 15s, they're not a bad looking head, but I think the 15s are a beautiful head. But they've just basically adapted. It's a slight progression on the previous series. Maybe a little bit more flight out of the M13 than 243. 243 found maybe slightly flat every now and then. And they've updated the Pro Fly High. So that head is now a kind of a smoky, kind of a charcoaly smoky finish rather than black. But a neater top line, but spins a little bit more. So actually as a long iron replacement, it retains a little bit more flight than previous models. But again, feels a little bit softer. Nice, good-looking overall head. I think that's a really nice model. But currently, that's all I can tell you about, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Come back next week.
Well, next week, I think there might be one other brand we can talk about, and then the following week, James and I'll be in the States. So, but will be lots coming out in the coming couple of weeks. There are going to be a load of product preview videos coming out. Mr. Calvo 90, hello, I have a flat driver swing plane, neutral path, but slightly negative angle of attack. I have trouble changing. Is there anything on the equipment side of the equation to increase angle of attack, perhaps lighter head or longer? Longer I wouldn't go to, because if you're already on a flatter swing plane, then the longer is just going to get it almost more behind. And if anything, your slightly negative angle of attack, I'll hand you that one, is down to, I'm going to exaggerate this, if the club gets on a very shallow plane, then to get it in here and hit up on it, you're going to have to come back off of it. So to get that up, you're going to have to stay back. So the club's around here, you've got to get it out in front, and normally that involves a bit of a catapult of the upper body back to get the club out in front. But if you're if you've got the neutral path from here, that means you're clearing through well, and then you've got a very, very stable square face. Longers like to make it worse. You could potentially try slightly shorter. The only thing I would say on this one is that if you're consistent with it, if you're hitting fairways, you can still be very efficient with the driver at 1.5 degrees down. You haven't got to be 3 or 4 up. And sometimes it's actually a case of saying, okay, if this is the way that I swing and this is what I can get consistency with, actually you can delve and change too much. If you're in the fairway regularly and you're getting efficient ball speed and the launch and the spin in a good window, you might be losing, you'll be losing a little bit of carry distance. You might be giving up 5-10 yards or so versus hitting up on it 3 degrees. But if that means spraying it, it's not worth having that extra distance. So I would be very careful about, if you've struggled to change it, then maybe it's not worth changing.
Work with it. Yeah. Some of the best, everyone says you must hit up on fairway woods even, but Henrik Stenson, who's probably regarded the best fairway wood player of all time, he's hit down on his 3 woods. Was it a 3 wood, 2 wood? Questions out on that one, but he hit down on it comfortably to 3 degrees. So
a lot of the tall guys for their fairway finders squeeze it a little bit.
Tee it a bit lower, squeeze it out.
Yeah. So yes, if they're lassoing it, they might hit up on it, but actually, I wouldn't obsess over that, because you might only pick up 10 yards, but if you're then missing fairways where you're regularly in them, that's far more damaging than gaining the extra distance and potentially ruining your timing. And so it's one I would proceed with caution, but equipment-wise, a shorter shaft is possibly the only thing that might help with it. But then again, if you're hitting it consistently well, maybe just don't mess with it.
Yeah. We got another question here from Michael Henderson 3169. Fitted with you 4 years ago into Modus 105 reg, but now I've found that I have a left miss and early closure.
Okay, yeah.
You said try 105 stiff. Seen your video on shaft weight. I've been trying Modus 120 stiff with good results. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so if swings got stronger, or it doesn't even have to get quicker, it can just be a more efficient action and you're delivering with more force essentially, then yeah, the extra, so the 120s aren't 120 gram other than the X-Flex. If it's in the stiff, they're 114. Modus 105 in a rig's about 102, 103. So that 10 odd grams extra, balance points in a very, very similar place. There's a bit in the bottom end to hit against. So if that's working well, then that dead weight change, you're using the weight better, and therefore that's knitting it together again. So the early closure is down to, it's an iron rather than a driver, but if the club's getting a little bit light, then as you put the power on, it's kind of getting, it's exaggeration, it's kind of getting into impact a little soon. So that's just then likely to kind of shut the face down. You're not going to throw it over the top, but it's almost like you shut the face down a little bit fast. So yeah, if you're now overpowering that weight, I mean the stiff's a few grams, in the 105 is a few grams heavier, but if that's not doing it, then what you've done with the 120 stiff and gone up that 10 grams or so, that's a substantial change, and one, that's mean you've done a really good work in your swing as well. Yeah, that's just giving you a lot more guts to hit against, so it makes total sense.
Great stuff. Next person, Floor3173. Hello from Texas. Hello. Love the channel. Having trouble with toe strikes with driver.
Okay.
340 max, 430 max. Denali Blue at 44.25 inches, C7 swing weight. Swing technique issue, or is there some adjustability with driver settings or swing weight that can help?
It might be that it's a little bit light. So if the club's light, pick up that driver again, then what happens is that it can get a little bit, there's not as much mass on the bottom actually taking you through to the ball. So obviously 44.25 is, from a relative ping standard length, is 1.5 inches shorter. We don't really build over 45 inches, but it's still coming down 0.5, 3/4 of an inch. So if there's not enough mass on the bottom, then it won't actually get you to the full extension. So it can mean that you're just kind of pulling in a little bit. And if it's regularly out the toe, certainly try adding 2 or 3 grams to the head. Now you can for the 430, depending on what head weight's in the back, there might be an extra bit of weight you can use for the back of the 430 max, or add 2 or 3 grams of lead tape to the toe, or anywhere on the head, but the toe's the easiest place, and see if that helps the contact. If it's consistent, then it might just be a case of standing a bit closer. You might not be doing anything wrong whatsoever, but just being a little bit too far for the ball. However, it sounds like it might just be a little bit light on swing weight, I would say.
Great stuff. Next question we got is Jason Owen 8193. Happy New Year to the both of you. I have a question reference glove size to grip size and how many layers of tape I have as a medium large glove.
Right.
Currently have standard grip 1 layer of tape.
Likely to be quite a lot too small. So the between a standard kind of core grip and a mid-size, you're generally looking at about 6 layers of tape of the standard 2-inch double-sided built-up tape. That's that we use. So you can add 1 or 2 layers of tape, but it makes it a bit of a difference. But relative to if you're a medium-large glove, that won't be in principle enough. Certainly, once you go into that medium-large size glove medium-large glove size, I'd normally be looking at a mid-size grip pretty much straight away. You don't want to have loads of kind of overlap and dig in. So if I'll put it onto here. So if you're finding that you're getting a lot of overlap in your top hand like that, basically that means that can move around. There's lots of space in there. You want to be ideally kind of your little finger on the top hand just passed around the center to clamp that in, keep it underneath the butt of the hand, and then tips of fingers touching. Now that is not an absolute law that you have to have it. Some players are better with a bigger grip or smaller grip, but relative to your glove size, it's certainly worth trying mid-size grip, for sure. Should help relieve a bit of grip pressure.
Nick KSO, which iron shafts have a similar profile and feel as Nippon 950 Neo, but in the 115 to 125 gram category?
So 950 Neo is a tip responsive. It's a pretty neutral balance point, but it's a more responsive profile to kick the flight up a little bit. Certainly be looking at something like a KBS Tour 110, 115, KBS Tour 120. That kind of shaft certainly fits the bill for that. In terms of giving a bit of kick and tip response, so most of the other shafts of that kind of weight, they tend to get a little bit more stout. So in terms of keeping the feel, that's where the KBS Tour series is a great model. The dollar tape is going to be more stout at the tip and bring the flight down a little bit more. Dynamic Gold Mid in the 115 has the tip response, but swings a little bit more bottom end heavy. So I'd be looking at KBS Tour is a great one for that.
Wonderful.
And the R Plus is the 115, the S is the 120, and the R is the 110. So depending on what weight you're looking at, then one of those is certainly going to work.
Next question is Miss Ali Nerd. Happy New Year, both. Had a useful putting lesson with Matt a few weeks ago. Glad you found it useful. Was just wondering if you guys will be getting your fancy putting green with lasers, slopes, etc. back in this year.
We're just waiting on a timing on it. They've been had to take it out to do some amendments to it, and there's some new parts that they're working on at the moment. We hope to find out pretty soon when that's coming back in. But yeah, it will be back in, just a case of when.
Yeah, as soon as it's in, Ali, I will drop you a message and let you know. Ivan R3221, following up on the earlier driver request, suggestions for an alternative to the GT3 driver. Tests with Diamana whiteboard. Time to have Matt have more hacks at it. Thank you very much.
Let me just think. Right, an alternative to. I'm going to think what we've still got. We're just about in trend. Well, if you're looking for really kind of depends how low you spin looking for. Actually, an alternative. I'll grab one that's an alternative.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because we're in that tricky transition period of changing over models and.
So I had that as an alternative that has pushed the GT3 very close this year. Strixon, the ZXi LS. That head and the Titleist have been very, very similar in terms of performance. The sound on this is a bit louder.
Okay. Is that material or?
Yeah. It's a titanium. Yeah, right. There's a bit of composite on there, but the note on it is a little bit louder. And the 440 LST. So it's not necessarily the lowest spin, it's not high spin head, but actually it's very much a lower launching head. I'll pop one of these on if you didn't give it a whack.
I'll have another hack at it. I don't get to play that much these days.
I thought you said you go on trips every couple of months.
I do go on trips, but as I found on the most recent one, the first 2 days were a bit rusty, and then the next 2 days are superb, and I wonder why ever stopped playing competitively, and then the last couple of days fatigue sets in, and
Did I spy a bit of karaoke going on one of the last ones?
There was a bit of karaoke going on. Yeah, a few of the guys got up. I did my usual hit, tequila. One word, done. Yeah, so no, that was a good trip. Turkey, that one. So we're back in Turkey again in just under 4 weeks' time.
I think there was a great video from one of the America's Got Talents where the bloke came and did the tequila one. Right, there we go. That's the Strixon and the LS. Yeah, it takes a few shandies for me to even consider doing that.
Yeah, it's luckily it was quite late in the day. So definitely sounds very different, doesn't it?
That's one of the reasons that the GT3's got a kind of calmer note. That was maybe a little lower on the face.
A little bit lower, a little bit toe. That seems to be the theme of the evening. Bit hard, bit of push maybe.
But you can see it again, where the DS Max K launched, so 7.1 got underneath it, but more 716-bit odd launched 2.9, that spins 400 lower. So actually, flight performance, when it's worked well, it's really pushed the GT3 in the fitting bay well, but the sound has been one of the bits that's been a bit of a turn-off for it.
I would agree.
Yeah. But ball speeds and spin have been in a good place for it. So.
Yeah, and visually looking down at it, I would say shape-wise and so on, it kind of between the two.
Yeah. Got a little bit more depth.
Yeah, it's got a little bit more depth than the GT3. Not quite as triangular as I would describe it compared to the Cobra. Feel-wise, all very similar. Personally, I'd say maybe the GT3 edges it a touch. But
it's a very stable. I think that's one of the things. The GT3 is a very stable head, and the note that's where it's kind of won out a little. Even though the Strixon actually is a very good value driver head. They were the first to use the variable face thickness, I think, if I'm right, in drivers. But it's the sound of the face doesn't help it too much. No. We've got a load of other questions, so we're going to try and crack through some of those rather than hit the ping. If we've got time, I'll get them to hit the ping at the end. Free Blue CJ. Hi fellas, my longest irons are 5-iron T150 with the Project X Red 120. Would you recommend the U505 or the T250U as my 4-iron? Could you compare, and would you go to ½ inch longer than my 5-iron? Thanks. I'll answer a bit now, grab. I mean, I think you generally, yeah, with the kind of shafts you're looking at and the swing strength, I'm assuming you've got your ½ inch longer shouldn't be a problem. Standard 4-iron length shouldn't be a problem at all. Between the T50U and the U505, U505 is a much bigger footprint and should launch it a little bit higher to loft, assuming lofts are the same. T250U spins it a little bit more, it's a slightly neater head shape. I would say based on the T150, the 250U is a little bit more of a natural one to go to from the 150. If you're in a 250, then going up to the 505 is probably a good way to go.
It's quite a big jump, isn't it?
It's a big jump,
the 505 from the 150.
We'll keep flying through the questions.
The next one I think is probably a bit more directed at me. Michael Barber 6200. Hi guys, I've seen a few comments that say any arc to your putt and stroke with a zero torque putter wouldn't be suitable. Thoughts, please. Love the show. I think from a zero torque putter perspective, I think there's a few misconceptions on what you should or maybe shouldn't do with it. Essentially, from a zero torque putter, the concept is if you don't put much force through the putter yourself, it should stay pretty square to the arc. Every putter should have a degree of arc to it. The reason being is, like any other club, the shaft isn't 90 degrees to the floor. If it was, then you could swing it on that pendulum motion that we all have been told about on a straight line back and through. But most putters are around the 70 degree lie angle. Labs come in at 69 as standard, but somewhere around 70-ish is kind of the norm. So because of that, your pivot point is going to be up here at the grip. So the club will always have a degree of arc. Now, obviously, more mallet style heads will arc traditionally a bit less. For me, if the conversation is, should I have a zero torque putter because I have arc in my stroke, fitting is the only way you'll know. It depends on if you put force through the putter yourself. Some people prefer torque because it actually gives them feel. So
I've got a stronger shaft, and I have to have toe hang, because otherwise I loop the putter,
Correct.
throw it at the end of the backswing. But then others I know who you'd think would do the same thing are way better without it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those horses for courses things. There's no one set rule for everybody. Like I said, it depends on your grip pressure. Do you put force through the putter yourself? For some people it's amazing. Other people it's a hindrance. So it's worth comparing and seeing what works for you and what doesn't. But as a rule of thumb, every putter will have a degree of arc. So it's worth just trying what's right for you.
Right.
Let's jump back to this.
Quickly give this to a quick slap to the 250U. Start with that. I got these both in the 3-iron loft because I can compare both heads. Oh, that one's not going to tell us anything other than what it's like off the bottom groove. Glad we're not outside. That would have stung like a good one.
That's made me feel a bit better. So
it's still a fairly strong flighted head, but there's 3.6, 3.7. There's a reasonable bit of spin on there. That's not right out of the middle of it, but the 250U is going to keep the launch angle from getting up too much. That gives a reasonable bit of forgiveness, even with how badly those were hit.
I mean, I've got that in a 2-iron for myself.
Yeah.
And I find it still quite versatile, even though it's a cleaner, smaller looking head than the 505. I can find I can still loft it should I want to. I can still knuckle it down when I need to.
They've been better on ball speed this year. 250U, I felt like for the right player, it jumps. It's performed very well in comparison to other brands of head. Obviously, the 505 visually, there's a lot more clubhead to look down on. And where I'm catching it a bit lower on the face today, there's more mass at the bottom, which has helped that get up a bit more, but we can see the launch is high, but the spin's less.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to get it kind of going as a shot, the U505 is going to do that, but kind of launching and kind of piling forwards. If you're looking to retain a bit of spin and have it more as like a kind of a progression off your irons, 250U is probably the head.
Wonderful. Golf Nerd 3. What are some same weight alternatives to the NS Pro 950 GH stiff, but lower torque? It's my fave shaft, but sometimes it just feels a bit squirrely unstable. 7-iron club speed, 90 mile an hour.
So at that speed, in principle, there's a more stout structure shaft. Steel at that weight, there's a fairly thin wall. It's not actually, I mean, steel has very low torque. So it's not really a torque profile. It's actually a general structural rigidity that you're probably not getting from that shaft. It's not a shaft that's necessarily designed for your kind of speed. If the weight's suitable, it's actually where, ironically, at that weight, a composite is a darn sight more stable. Something like a Aerotech steel fiber. I mean, the Axiom, I don't think what weight the Axiom, they've got the 90 in there now. But something like the Axiom in a 90-gram weight, those sorts of shafts, there's so much more material. They can be a darn sight more stable through that bottom section, and you're going to get a lot less of that, can you say, squirrely kind of feel to them. So if you're trying to keep it in the same weight window but go more stable, that's where the composites could really help.
Wonderful. Next one we'll probably come back to if we have time at the end, because we are running out of time. Can we have a pitch off from 1790 and 110 yards? So if we have time, maybe we'll do a little pitch off at the end.
Yeah, we can try and find
Hello, young men, from Papa B3272. I don't know, everyone thinks I'm older than I am, but I'm confused, and not just because I'm ancient. My launch angle on my gap wedge, sand wedge, and lob wedge shots are around 25 to 7 degrees, with a height of around 75 feet. Shouldn't the numbers increase as loft increases?
In theory, yes. I know on tour they look for half the loft as the launch angle.
Most of them peak at a similar height as well, whether it's a wedge to a 7-iron. So, you would imagine more loft would give you more height, but actually it gets to the same height quicker.
Yeah. That's why it often looks higher, because it just peaks nearer to the player. So, it's actually when you do a gapping test on TrackMan, actually, and then plot, if sometimes look at the view of kind of side on, they're all pretty much on the same level.
Generally, give or take 5 to 10 feet.
Or whether if you've got the set makeup right, then they will be.
Jesse N 1976. Is there any significance to stated shaft flex, or is it just a way to specify weight in a range? An example would be, would you try a KBS tour like X and tour reg for the same player?
So ultimately, is there any relevance to the flex letter other than for where it is for that model? Not really. But the tour light in an X is a 105 gram shaft and the KBS tour reg is a 110. They will feel a little different because they're the extremes of the opposite ends of the extremes on the flex range. In theory, the X in the light might feel a little bit tighter, but because it's designed to play at the stiffest of that shaft's range versus the reg in the KBS tour. But ultimately, I would always say you're trying to get the club and the player to sync up so that you're in control of the club head. That's the bit that gets control of the club head, not the flex of the shaft, because the shaft flex does not get that toe closing that way. It kicks under a little bit, but it doesn't flip the toe over or hold onto it. I mean, technically it holds onto it a little bit more, but the stiffer flex. But that's more when you get to woods, you get a little less gearing on a lower torque, tighter, stiffer profile, less so on irons. But you're fitting for weight first, and I would fit weight first and foremost to dial in the timing, and then shaft profile is a little bit about feel. But ultimately, the difference the stiffness makes to performance is absolutely infinitesimal compared to weight.
Wonderful. Nick KSO back on again. Which iron heads are closest to the Ping I240 in terms of spin, forgiveness, and consistency?
Ooh. I mean, spin-wise, T100 is pretty darn close. I think you find the M13 iron will be a hair less, but won't be too far off. It's one of the things that makes the 240 a really good head, or that model, that 210, 230, 240 series over the years, is there's a bit of tech in there. There's a bit of tungsten in the toe. There's a bit of everything that you need, but without going too far in one direction or other, to make it too unforgiving, too clunky. So actually, as an all-round for flight retention, spin retention, rather than getting one going and getting kind of a lower spin flight. Oh, it's a tough one to beat. It's a really tough one to beat because I don't think the T100 is quite as forgiving, but it definitely retains a spin the same way. So what will be very interesting, actually one that might well do it, the Cobra, the 3D printed tour heads. They're a lot dearer, but for forgiveness in a frame of that shape and they're not designed to bomb the flight as well, that would probably be the one that might just beat it, but you're paying a lot more for it.
Very interesting. This one here, which we won't be able to do today, but could you please compare the Mizuno JPX 925 versus M13? Certainly wouldn't have it in hand to be able to do it. But...
Well, the M13 there, whilst the embargo lifted today, will get them in a couple of weeks' time, but the 925 series, is that the current one? Am I getting wrong? 925, JPX 9? Oh, it's the 925 hot metal.
Yeah, JPX.
Yeah, I'm getting my models mixed up. Yeah, as soon as we have it in, we'll be able to do that, but probably looking at, I would imagine the first live after we get back from the States would be the first time we'd be able to do that, which will be the 26th of January, I think.
And that'll be a really interesting one with your feedback from everything you've seen at the latest launch of most things.
I'll be able to talk about everything by then as well. Yeah.
Daniel Winterbottom 5531. Hi Simon, I found your comment about shaft flex. I find that I have to work my Modus 130 a lot at the top and I end up coming across. Would a lighter shaft or different swing weight work?
By the sounds of it, a lighter shaft. You've got to work it, so the 130 is actually a 125 gram weight. If you're having to work it hard from the top, then you're having to kind of fetch the club, and if you're then getting over the top, I think so, then that generally ties in with having to get that right shoulder into it to get the club back down, and going a little lighter will help you to bring the handle in with you and just let the club drop into the slot. Whereas if it gets heavy, you go, the club doesn't come with you, and then you're having to, obviously exaggerated, fetch at it to get the club there. So strong chance that a lighter shaft weight will just help the handle end to come with you as you turn down, and not throw it from the top.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes left, so we've got a few questions to rattle through. Dan Benson 83, what is the difference between a taper and a parallel shaft in terms of feel?
The taper, so the parallel shaft, essentially you're tip trimming it to shorten or lengthen, or not lengthen, but to shorten relative to the head you're using the tip section. So actually, the only bit changing in the shaft is that very bottom part. So if anything, you're likely to get a more consistent feel through the tip of a taper tip shaft. Now, pretty much every single steel shaft starts as a parallel tip and is then made into a taper tip, but they are built and designed to have that done to them. The parallel tip, the danger of the parallel shaft is that it actually gets lighter into the shorter irons. So because it's based off the same blank, but they're just you're cutting it down shorter. So actually you have a descending weight series of shafts. Whereas the taper tip, they're what we call discrete lengths. They actually get the base shaft where it gets heavier as you go into the short irons, which means as you trim them down, you're maintaining the weight across the iron set. So actually you might lose a bit of feel for the club in the short irons on a parallel set, but get a more consistent feel through the shaft on a taper tip because of the way they've been designed. I hope that made sense.
Joseph Worthley 7868. Gents, can some players with 115 mile an hour swing speed get away with playing a stiff driver shaft, not extra stiff?
100%. 100%. Now there is stiff and stiff. You know, a brand like Acra, for example, their shafts play really quite stout, or even something like that whiteboard, or you take LA Gold series, they're structurally very stable, Aventus, for example. So if you're someone who hasn't got a harsh transition, it's a sort of quieter, more kind of gradual change in direction, then you will be more likely to be able to use either flex. If you have a hard transition, then you're going to feel that difference in the shaft. And so the more stout shaft is likely to feel more consistent and therefore be more comfortable to hit with, because it's not going to feel like it gets away from you. Some of the softer handle sections, when you make a move down and change quickly, you're loading that top bit pretty hard, and it can start to feel a bit wobbly, a bit squirrely, to go back to the point someone else made earlier. So if you've got a quieter tempo, then you probably quite like the softer flex. If you've got a sharper tempo, then the stiffer flex is going to feel a bit more controlled.
Wonderful. Any shaft product lines, recommendations to sync with Wood's driver for two different players? First player who plays NS Pro 950 GH stiff in irons, and the other KBS PGI 90. Thank you. That's Golf Nerd 3.
It's a hard one. I mean, the 950 is a very consistent profile. So if you're looking for something that's going to feel similar, you've got shafts like Mitsubishi C6 is a very consistent feeling shaft in terms of that kind of mid to kind of crosswise lower end range. You go up into the higher end, something like the Acra Shogun series, a very smooth feeling shaft. So might well work with that. And then into the PGI 90, being that little bit heavy, it'll feel, or for graphite at that weight, will feel a little bit more stout. So probably go to something a little bit more stable. If you're in that weight, you might be in the 55 gram of the Ventus. Ventus Blue is going to feel a bit more stable. It's not as hard as the first gen. Something along those lines might complement it well, but it doesn't mean that is actually going to be a shaft that works. But in principle, those sorts of styles of shaft I'd like to make feel similar.
Okay, we've got 1 minute left, so I'm going to try and rattle these off quick fire. Simon, is there a forgiveness difference in the G430 versus G440 LSTs?
440 LST is probably a hair more forgiving, but it's not quite as low spin. So they prioritised a bit of stability versus a bit of low spin. So yeah, a little more stable on the 440.
Wonderful. Marshall Derby 8134. Hi gents, do you provide all of the specs and notes taken from the fitting to the customer afterwards for them to review? Or is this kept with you and only used if clubs are purchased directly from yourself? No,
it's something that if someone wants them, ask us and we'll provide them for you. It's something that we used to send everyone, and then a lot of people said, well, I don't really have a use for these. So we don't do it as a matter of course. However, it's your info, you're absolutely welcome to them. So if you wanted them following a fitting, just let the fitter know and we'll send everything over.
Hey guys, a lot of videos about grip size and grip weight options. To focus on left and right dispersion. I'm wondering if you've ever noticed whether these can be used to raise or lower low point.
I'm sure there is some effect on it, but that's going to go more into individual technique and how the weight and the balance changes how you move. I mean, from a fitting point of view, we'd be looking at size first, and then does a change in weight of the grip affect how the player moves the club? The answer is normally yes. So it can have an impact, but it's going to be very player specific. So it's a question that's way more specific than I can give a general answer to, because it's so down to how you move the club and how the club swings for you. And yeah, there's no absolute yes or no. There will be some effect, but yeah, that would need to be with you in person to work that one out.
We got time for any more?
We'll get a couple more in. We'll get a couple more in. We've been a few weeks without.
So, another question, if I'm not too greedy, Mr. Calvo 90. Any thoughts on Accra iSteel Red 120 shafts? How do they compare to DG 120? Thank you for sharing your incredible knowledge.
That's very kind. The Accra 120s are a little bit more tip stiff. So they both swing fairly tip heavy, but the DG 120s are slightly more responsive, feeling the Accra 120s are a little bit more tip stiff. So in theory, slightly lower spin, but they play a bit more stout.
Wonderful. Eric Rowe G2F, how important is the alignment aid versus arc for a putter to be the right fit? Personally, yes, we've got to get the right alignment aid to match the putter that we're looking at, to match your arc. Generally, if you're someone who's got a lot of arc in your putting stroke, going to, maybe a more mallet style putter where the alignment can be quite elongated from front to back wouldn't be ideal. It kind of correlates to, the shape of the head for the arc that you have, for matching the weight of the head. Quite often players feel they must go into a mallet, but actually if their arc suits a blade, then making the blade a little bit heavier for stability can avoid the wandering, as I call it, throughout the stroke. So the alignment options on a blade are going to be a little bit trickier. You might have a dot on the top line, you might have a line on the top line and back edge. Some of the brands offer more alignment options than others. If you are someone who's got a lot of arc, then you something like Bertie Boucher that we fit here, countless different options on what alignment you can have on the top edge and the trail edge of a blade. It does depend on kind of how you're arcing it and then the models that we're looking at, I would say, depending on the alignment you have. The other question would be the alignment you have on the ball. Do you do a line on the ball? Some people just put a dot on the ball. What we're looking at there as well. So it's probably a little bit more intricate than just alignment aids to arc, but it's something to consider and look at in a fitting.
I'm glad you said that a long line on a strong arc putter isn't a good thing, because I was waiting for you to go, yeah, that should work well. I go, oh. I had to take mine out.
No, I don't like to see it. I think
it can get a little bit confusing.
It can be a lot going on. And if people see long lines in an arc, it can almost show rotation, but it's not rotation. It's quite often it's the face remaining square to the arc rather than rotation. So it can create misinterpretation of what's going on during the stroke.
Right, we'll give it one more.
One more.
And then we'll wrap it up. But thank you for all the engagement. This is fantastic. So thanks for all the questions.
Last one, Marshall Derby 8134 back again. Thinking about changing the standard Superstroke grip on my Spider putter to a thinner one like Ping PP58. What considerations do I need to take when doing this? Will I need to change the head weight? Obviously, changing grip on a putter, generally weight of grip will make a difference, same as any other club throughout the bag. It will change the swing weight of it. Now, you might find that going to something thinner might feel like a bit more weight on the head. That might feel more comfortable. Alternatively, going thicker, it might make the head feel too light. So it's something to consider. I would say maybe if you're going to do that and you like the feel of your current putter, do the research, find out the weights of them. It's not just the thickness, it's the compound of the rubber as well. Some maybe feel a little bit more foamy, as I would describe it, a bit more sort of padded. So they might feel lighter, but actually there's a bit of weight there. Whereas the more traditional putters grips, I would call it, is a bit more of a heavier compound, yet thinner. So it's more the weight rather than the size. Check that out, and then that will make an idea of what will happen as an effect.
That's the irony. Superstroke 1 is heavier than the 2 and the 3, and it's smaller.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
It adds variability to what we have to do on a daily basis. So, yeah, that's all the questions.
We get through them all.
We got through them all.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Again, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Golf in 2026. Thanks to those from across the globe who've tuned in. Always great to have people firing questions at us from the other side of the pond and anywhere in the globe as well. So I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be back again. Well, we'll see. Maybe Matt, we might find someone else. Now that it's not going to be Stuart, we'll probably try and rotate a little bit to get some different guests in as well. And we'll see if we can get some special ones in at some point too. But thanks for joining us. Have a fabulous start to 2026, and we will look forward to seeing you this time next week, next Monday. Thanks. See you again soon.